This is Mr. Beck Does Your Homework. This is AP Physics, assignment 2.3 for 4 equations of motion. This is a two-part question, questions 12 and 13. 12 says, a sailboat starts from rest and accelerates at a rate of 0.22 meters per second squared over a distance of 250 meters. Find the magnitude of the boat's final velocity. Magnitude, that sometimes is a very important point. When it asks for magnitude, magnitudes are always positive. So every vector has a magnitude and a direction, but when it asks for the magnitude, that's always going to be a positive part. So let's see, a sailboat starts from rest. That tells me that my initial velocity, I'll put it here, my initial velocity is 0 meters per second, starts from rest. Accelerates at a rate of 0.22 meters per second squared. My acceleration is 0.22 meters per second squared over a distance of 250 meters. So my distance, or my displacement, is 250 meters. Find the magnitude of the boat's final velocity. So what I'm looking for is my final velocity, and if it's negative, I would turn it into a positive. So that's what I'm looking for. Now I'm going to find the equation that does not have time, because I don't know about time and I don't care about time. So the equation I'm going to use is v squared equals v0 squared plus 2ax. So my final velocity squared is my initial velocity squared, which is 0 squared, well that's easy, plus twice my acceleration, 0.22, times my displacement of 250. So when I multiply these together and square root it, I will get myself a final velocity. Question 13 says, how long does it take the boat to travel this distance? So now for question 13, what I'm looking for is time. So since I have a final velocity, I could use any of a number of equations to get my time, anything with time in it. Actually, any of the other 3 equations have time in it since I have this final velocity. But sometimes it's safer, if I happen to have made a mistake here, it'll also affect me here. So why don't I just find the equation without final velocity, but does have time? That's the one I'm going to use. So the one without final velocity says that my displacement equals my initial velocity times time plus 1/2 acceleration times time squared. So my displacement is 250 meters equals my initial velocity times time. Well, that's 0 times time, so that's going to go away, plus 1/2 my acceleration times time squared. So again, 250 equals 1/2 my acceleration is 0.22 meters per second squared, that's a 0, times time squared. Now, I lucked out there. Sometimes you will have an initial velocity. If you do have an initial velocity, you'll notice that this is going to be a quadratic, and you'll have to use the quadratic formula. If you're comfortable with that, go right ahead. But most of the time, if you run into something like that, then I'd say just use the the final velocity from here, because it'll make it easier than running that big quadratic formula for yourself. So t squared is 250 times 1/2 times 0.22, so multiply by 2. Divide by 0.22, and that's going to be my time squared, so square root both sides, and there is my time when I do that math.